Thanks for tuning into the Realtor Moms podcast. We are Tasha and Jamie, full-time realtors and admittedly average moms. This is how we sell homes and try to keep our kids alive.
On today's Realtor Moms podcast, we're going to be talking about Zillow and Zestimates and how to appropriately figure out the list price or an approximate value on your home.
Trust me when we say us realtors in the field, we are not a fan of Zestimates.
We're not.
If you're looking, for homes, there's better ways than looking for value on Zestimates.
Right.
They're not accurate for many, many reasons.
We've seen something out there, and I don't know how accurate it is. I can't even cite the source, but it's something out there that has said Zestimates are generally within 10% of an accurate number approximately 10% of the time. So think about that. That's pretty poor.
That's a really poor number.
Yeah, that means they're more than 10% off 90% of the time. So they're not completely out there always, but take them with certainly the grain of salt that they deserve. So since we aren't big fans of Zestimates, maybe we'll give you some insight as to how we identify an appropriate list price for your home. So, Tasha, what are some of the things that you do when you're trying to arrive at an appropriate list price?
One thing I really start off with is I want to look for comparable homes that have sold. And it depends on the time of year, but I do try to keep it within 3 to 6 months. If, let's say, you're listing your home in the fall, I'll look more along the lines of a year out. But homes that have sold. And I'm trying to keep this, I want the style to be the same if possible. I don't want to compare a Rambler to a 2-story or a bi-level. The numbers just won't be accurate. I'm also looking to keep it within a mile, if I'm looking in town, to keep it within a mile range, because I try to follow what appraisers do and how they approach their numbers and how they come up with their market value.
Right. And going back to when we were talking about time frames, you said you generally like to keep it between 3 and 6 months. What if somebody is looking to list their house in February? Are you looking at statistics from December? Between Thanksgiving and New Year's?
I may look.
I'm setting you up for an answer.
I know you're setting me up for an answer. When I am looking there, I might, if they're thinking February, I don't want to compare the homes that were on the market in the fourth quarter.
Right.
Generally speaking, the fourth quarter is going to be the slowest month of the year. So I might be more prone to look at numbers at the end of the summer, because the numbers at the end of the summer might match up more closely to what numbers would be in, say, a February list time frame.
They correlate better. Totally.
They correlate. So I try to look at what trends are doing. And also my advice and my feedback does change depending on if we're in a seller's market or a buyer's market. So there's quite a few different scenarios that kind of play into kind of my time frame and what comparables I'm looking for and when they sold. What is your approach?
Points.
Because I know my approach is a little bit different than yours.
And I think part of that too is I sell a little bit more real estate outside of town. So the 1 mile radius doesn't necessarily always apply.
No, it does not.
I also sell property in Lakes Country. So something to think about when I'm looking at property maybe in Kindred where I live, or Mapleton or Castleton, is I'm comparing similar sized communities and similar homes within those communities. So if I've got a 2-story in Kindred that I have listed for sale, I'm probably not going to find a lot of comparable properties right in Kindred. But I'll look to Horace and to Mapleton and maybe all the way up to Harwood. It's certainly farther away, but there's sort of a similar type of community with a similar distance to Fargo.
And I do have to say, I've sold in those areas too, not as much as you do, but that is the same approach I take.
Right.
It's
very specific.
It's very specific.
Also things that Zillow just doesn't do.
Exactly.
They aren't unable to compare those kind of communities. They're just really looking within a very static information set where they're just kind of canvassing entire neighborhoods and not necessarily looking for the best comparables.
Sometimes when I have seen Zillow Zestimates, they're not taking into consideration the style of home either.
True. Yeah.
It's very rare that I would I don't know if I have ever compared a bi-level to a Rambler. That is tough. It's just not going to be the most accurate information.
Right.
It really will not be. So style of home does play a factor, and age of home. I want to keep it within a certain age range if I can, because when I'm coming up with my numbers, the most similar homes I can find to the home I'm trying to come up with a price range for is important, because I want to make the least amount of changes in terms of differences and what that means for price as possible.
Right. How do you adjust the home or the projected list price when there are similar homes like it already on the market?
That are active?
Yeah.
Well, one thing I will do is I do base it off of closed sales, but what I like to do is kind of do a nice list view of what is currently active, and then take what has been sold. And I sit down with my clients and I say, okay, here's the information on what has sold within certain time frames. But then I also take that information and I talk about how to competitively price their home in terms of what's actively for sale.
Sure.
And I go into information when I've seen homes that are quite a bit overpriced in my belief. I will talk about that information and say, maybe what we want to do is approach this and have a number below that price, because your home is going to be much more attractive than the one that may be overpriced.
Totally.
So I do it both ways, but at the end of the day, I just provide the information to help my client decide what is the best price for them, because maybe they're okay with sitting on the market for a little while and testing out a price. Then they're the ones that make the decision. I'm just there to kind of help guide them into making the right decision for themselves.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. That's a really great point. Sometimes a fast sale isn't necessarily the top of their priority. Maybe they still have to find the place that they're moving to, or maybe they're moving out of state and they need more time to get where they're going, and they just want to get the process started. So yeah, timing is huge.
So Jamie, tell me what you do in terms of homes that are on the market that you're using as comparables for the homes you're trying to come up with a number for.
Yeah. So when I'm working with sellers, and obviously everything that you said is perfectly on point, looking at the sold properties and the pending properties to come up with a value, but also looking at what's currently for sale, because that's your active competition. So yes. I like to sit down with my sellers, basically pretend that we are going to go out and look at homes. So I enter in some search criteria. Maybe this house has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, just like the one I'm going to be listing. And maybe we're going to look for only homes in South Fargo, for example. I will do a search, pull up the results that end up there, and then we'll kind of comb through the listing description, some of the details. We'll talk about the special assessments and some of the other little fine point items, and we will look through the photos and comb through them and kind of see where on that list our home, our home that we're trying to sell, it should fall. Is it, do we perceive that its value is a little more than the 4th one on this list, or is it a little less than the 2nd one on this list? Oh, maybe it's got a nicer garage or some other attribute. And it kind of helps a seller place themselves in the market, so they're not just necessarily taking my word for it, but they're pretending, they're putting their own feet in the shoes of a buyer, and kind of seeing where their house will show up in a search that a buyer might be looking for.
And that's perfect advice. I know
thanks, Tasha.
You brought it up a little bit more in detail, but I agree that is the perfect way to go about having these conversations with where a home should be listed. So
totally. Another thing that I get this question a lot. Tell me if you get it too. What's $1 per square footage in town?
Yes.
It's such a bad question. Well, it's not a bad question. It's just it's not a reliable statistical source of information. We have, like Tasha had said, lots of different styles of homes, whether it be Rambler with a basement, Rambler without a basement, 2 stories, bi-level, tri-level, all kinds of different homes. And to just give something value based on the livable square footage on the inside does such a disservice to its location. Maybe it's next to a park. Maybe it's got a really great garage and a awesome man or woman cave attached to it.
A she shed.
Maybe it's got a she shed, Cheryl. And there just can be so many different attributes. You're not taking into consideration if it's got hardwood floors, or if it has vaulted ceilings or picture windows or a beautiful east and south facing sunroom, or any of those things, when all you're focused on is $1 per square foot. So that really is not a reliable indicator. And another thing that can kind of be used as a guide, but not necessarily a definitive tool for estimating a list price, is taxable value. We kind of are in a weird position with taxable values. We don't want to pay any more taxes than we have to. So we like to see our taxable values be a little less than our market value. They can kind of be a guide, but they certainly aren't the be all end all for what a house should be listed at.
For what the house is worth. Exactly.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to talk about too is depending on where you list your home, one thing we always have to take into consideration is what will that appraisal value come back at?
True.
Because if you have someone that comes to, if someone comes with a loan, if they make a offer on your home and it's contingent upon financing, you will have to have an appraisal on your home. And if we are priced above what that appraisal value is, if we see that number come in $20,000 lower than what it should be, it's not that we're not going to try and come up with better comparables or try and work with the appraiser to try and get that price adjusted. But if we're not able to do so, we can't sell a home if a bank says it's not worth that amount, or an appraiser does not say that home is worth that amount.
It can definitely bring with it a host of new problems. Potentially a buyer could bring additional cash and the transaction could continue as is, but a lot of times what happens when there's a large discrepancy in appraisal value compared to purchase agreement price, we do see some problems with getting that to the finish line. But that's what realtors are here for too. We're here to try to get you through those rough spots as well. So to give you a little recap, enlist the help of a realtor instead of just relying on Zillow to come up with appropriate market value for your home. We really appreciate you listening to our podcast, and we'd love even more if you'd send us some content ideas. If you have a question or a topic you'd like covered, please visit our website at realtormomspodcast.com.
And follow us on Instagram with #RealtorMomsPodcast.
This podcast is produced by Jamie R. Swenson and Tasha Barrett of Park Company Realtors, 28 North 10th Street, Fargo, North Dakota, 58102.